Good morning, everyone, and we're back for another sort of transfer special of On the Whistle. We're going to have a little bit of a chat about the whole game the other night and bring you up to speed with a little bit of a Real Betis preview a little bit later in the video. But first and foremost, we're here to talk about potentially another really exciting Sunderland signing, the 8th of the summer. Now, at the time of recording, Robin Roefs hasn't been officially announced as a Sunderland player, but I suspect it's only a matter of time. Very possible that by the time most of you are watching or listening to this video, he will officially be a Sunderland player. Certainly at a stage where we can kind of talk about him coming into the team and what he might contribute and what his key strengths are, as we did with Granit Xhaka earlier in the week, who still feels quite incredible to say, but has now officially been confirmed as a Sunderland player. So yeah, Robin Roefs, a young goalkeeper from Dutch club NEC. Sunderland have agreed a deal in the region of €10.5 million with potentially around 3 million in add-ons, dependent on future performances. Understood there's a sell-on clause included there as well. Now in pounds, that's about 9 million up front with around 2.5 million potentially in add-ons. So we're talking about around an £11.5 million deal. Really interesting one in terms of the makeup of Sunderland's squad and what they're trying to do this season, because obviously it's been pretty clear from fairly early in the summer the goalkeeper was a position where they want to strengthen and add some serious competition for Anthony Patterson. And it's been an interesting one because initially, of course, some of the deals they pursued were incredibly ambitious. We're talking about OGC Nice's Marcin Bulka, Chelsea's Jordan Petrovic. Bulka obviously in the end pursued a really lucrative deal to go to Saudi Arabia to play for Neom. Petrovic joining Bournemouth, who of course at this stage a more established Premier League club after a really successful loan in League One with Strasbourg. Roofs is a little bit of a different profile, and I think that's what's quite interesting about this deal. So he's made around 36 appearances for NEC in his career, but last year was kind of his breakthrough season, if you like. He made 33 league appearances for the club, and also then went earlier this summer to play as the Netherlands under-21 starting goalkeeper in the European Championships. So this is a little bit more in line with, generally speaking, what Sunderland have done this summer, where they have used their sort of strong financial position and their position now as a Premier League club to go out and recruit some really exciting young talent who clearly are nowhere near their full potential yet, have a lot of development to do, but also have a little bit of top tier experience. So Roose having played now a full season as a starting goalkeeper in a kind of top European league. So this is a little bit more, we talked a little bit earlier this week about the Xhaka deal being a bit of a move away from what Sunderland do and sort of paying quite a lot of money for a really experienced campaigner without a great deal of resale value. This is a lot more in terms of in line what we were expecting them to do this summer, more generally in terms of adding a player who, yes, has played at the top level, but potentially still has a significant resale value to Sunderland and who still has a lot of development to do. Now, this is a really decisive and I think quite ambitious move from Sunderland. So Roose, as you would expect for a goalkeeper, very much still in his early 20s, who's got some experience at a top level league, had a lot of interest this summer. There was a lot of speculation that he could move to French club Lille, because their goalkeeper could be moving to Paris Saint-Germain. That move hasn't happened yet, but it shows you the kind of esteem that this guy was held in. As in a few cases this summer, Sunderland's kind of financial prudence in the Championship, if you like, which has left them with a lot of sort of PSR headroom and a lot of scope to invest this summer, means they've been able to move really decisively to meet the asking price. And I think it's more of an exciting sort of deal in terms of where this club's headed. Now, what kind of keeper is Roose and what will he bring to the team? Now, obviously, because he's only had one full season in senior football, if we look at the statistics, we're only looking at one season, so it's not a huge sample size. So we've got to be a little bit cautious in terms of trying to establish what kind of goalkeeper is, what his key strengths are. As I say, we're only working with one full season, and so there's a lot of room for development here. But looking at his stats from FBref, as we have been doing all summer, gives us a little bit of an indication for what he's good at, where he stood out this season, and what he maybe brings slightly different to the Sunderland squad. So I think the headline statistic always with the goalkeeper, even in the modern game, is shot stopping. And certainly Roose, according to FBref, had a really strong season on that front last season. So this is, when we're comparing him to other goalkeepers, this is in what FBref refers to as the next 14 competitions. So they have their big 5 leagues, which is England, Italy, France, Spain, Germany. The Eredivisie comes into what they call the next 14 competitions. So the Championship is in there, but you also have some top European leagues like the Dutch League, of course, the Belgian League is another one, and some other divisions. So the key statistic here is post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed. Now that is a really wordy statistic, but let me explain a little bit more about it. So obviously you know what XG is. It attributes a value to a shot as to how likely it is to go in, depending on where the shot's from, who's taking the shot, the position in the box, etc, etc. So Roose is plus 0.3 per 90 for this statistic. So basically in the green, if you like, 0.3 per 90 in terms of his shot stopping, which is a really good statistic. That puts him in the top 9% for goalkeepers in the next 14 competitions. So a good shot stopper. But I think where Roose is really standing out in the statistic that I think that really sort of catches his eye and marks him out as one of the best up-and-coming goalkeepers in Europe. He's in the top 3% for crosses stopped percentage. And he's in the top 1% for crosses stopped per 90. So what does this tell us? It tells us that he's a goalkeeper who's really aggressive in coming off his line, likes to get off his line, likes to try and claim the ball, and ranks incredibly favourably, not just young goalkeepers, but goalkeepers generally across the next 14 competitions. So that, I think, gives you a little bit of an insight in terms of him being quite a modern goalkeeper, if you like, takes risks, is very aggressive. And that's also backed up by a couple of other statistics that I wanted to draw your attention to because I thought they were really interesting. So he was in the top 11% for just general touches of the ball for a goalkeeper. And he was in the top 19% for defensive actions outside his penalty area. So what does that tell you? He's taken up quite aggressive positions off his line. He's very comfortable and confident in coming to sweep up. So I think if we're looking at what the statistics are telling us, it's a goalkeeper with solid basics in terms of his shot stopping, but maybe a more kind of modern goalkeeper, if you like, in terms of what goalkeepers are expected in the modern game in terms of their starting positions. I've been watching some clips of him on Y-Scout. Doesn't give you the whole picture, of course, but what it does show is he's definitely someone taking up quite an aggressive position outside his box, offering an option for defenders or midfielders to give the ball to and start attacks with his distribution. Predominantly left-footed, but seems relatively comfortable using his right as well, which is always useful for a goalkeeper, opens up a lot of options. So yeah, a really modern goalkeeper, far from the finished article. Maybe a slightly different profile to what Sunderland initially were looking at in terms of a Petrovic or a Bulka, who perhaps, while still they were both young for goalkeepers, a little bit more of the finished article. And I think that's what's really interesting about this in terms of throwing it forward to what this means for the season. I don't think this is one that sort of relegates Anthony Patterson to not giving him a chance of getting in the team. I think that realistically, when you spend over 10 million on a goalkeeper, I would expect that goalkeeper to be the starting goalkeeper. Roose has a massive advantage because Patterson is currently injured. Labrise is hopeful that Patterson will be able to be available for the start of the season, but it's not clear at this point. So Roose, I think, probably has got a chance to come in and kind of put a stamp on this position and make it his own. But I think it's pretty clear that what Sunderland have here is two talented young goalkeepers. Patterson obviously has a level of senior experience that Roose doesn't have at this point. So I expect these two to battle for the number one shirt this year. I don't think it's kind of over for Patterson, if you like. I don't think that's the kind of deal that this is. I think Roose will have the advantage coming in to begin with, but I think it'll be up to them both to kind of battle for that shirt. And although Labrise wasn't talking about Anthony Patterson, I'll explain why I'm kind of mentioning these quotes because I think they're interesting. I asked Labrise about Dan Neil the other night because obviously there's an interesting situation there where someone's recruiting aggressively in midfield positions. Dan Neil hasn't been in the kind of starting 11, if you like, in this pre-season, obviously coming in the last year of his contract as well. And then I asked Labrise where he felt Dan Neil was and what his kind of future was and what his position was. And he was very clear that there was that he definitely felt there was a Neil could play a part of the season and play a big part of the season, but also making really clear that the gap from the Championship to the Premier League is massive and that he feels that some of these players will need time to adjust to that level. They'll need time to build their confidence at that level, and that Sunderland want to make sure they have the level of depth that they need to sort of hit the ground running and have the full season. And although, as I say, he was talking about Dan Neil, not Anthony Patterson, I get the feeling that Patterson is in this category. Sunderland definitely feel he can play at this level and he has a chance to fight his way into the team. But I think they feel that they also need some more top-level experience to kind of hit the ground running. As I say, Roose is not quite in sort of the same bracket in terms of his experience as a Petrovic or a Bulka. but obviously haven't played in a top European league, and kind of gives him that slight edge, if you like, and I do expect him to come in and play a lot of minutes. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight into Robin Roefs. As I say, we aren't talking about a massively experienced goalkeeper, and so we don't have a huge sort of wealth of knowledge about what his style is and how he's going to adapt to the Premier League. We don't know how he'll do, but certainly his reputation is one of the sort of brightest young goalkeepers coming out of the Eredivisie, and someone with a really, really strong reputation is definitely underlined by what he did for NEC last season, who finished in mid-table, and hopefully those numbers that I've given you give you a bit of a background to that. So yeah, we'll have a little chat just before we finish. Not a huge amount to say about the whole game really, in terms of I thought that Sunderland improved from Hearts, and that was a real positive. I thought that Hull were a really good opposition. I have to say I was impressed by them. They've obviously had a little bit of a turbulent summer in terms of some of the things that have been going on off the pitch, but they looked pretty well coached to me, physically quite strong. I thought their build-up play was pretty good. I thought there were lots of positives from a Sunderland perspective, in the sense that Simon Adingra getting his first goal and Chemsdean Talby getting his first assist, and I thought generally Talby delivered a much improved display. I think you can start to see he's getting a little bit of confidence, he's getting a little bit of more decisive in his first touch, he's getting a little bit more aggressive in what he's doing on the pitch. That was the two big positives for me. I thought there were times in the game where Sunderland's midfield really took control, some positive signs from Noah Siddiqui, some really positive signs from Habib Diarra at times as well. Enzo Lefebvre I thought had an off night, but I'm not too worried about that because we know what Enzo Lefebvre can produce, and to be honest, he's been excellent in pre-season, so I'm not too concerned about one little dip. I thought it was a fair result. Hull were clearly the stronger team when Lebris made loads of changes and put his more inexperienced side out and his younger side out. A little bit of a mismatch at times with a more experienced Hull front line against a very young Sunderland back line. I have to say that I thought Hull deserved to be level in terms of what they'd done when the two stronger teams were out as well. And so I can't sit here and say that Sunderland were brilliant and looked amazing. But there were enough patches in the game where Sunderland took control for me to feel like they're building their way up to the start of the season fairly well. So it's not one I'm reading too much into, other than, as I say, I thought there were some positives. Dan Ballard really strong at the back, looks really fit. And that's obviously a big positive. And as I say, the two wingers and some signs from the midfielders as well, that I think we can take some positives for, even if Sunderland have to improve significantly from where they've been the last couple of games. Absolutely no two ways about it. I think there are some signs that they're building in. I'm hoping there'll be some positive news on Saturday in terms of that defence, and that there's a chance Reynaldo makes his debut. I spoke to Lebris after the whole game. He said he didn't want to sort of speak too early and say that Reynaldo would definitely be involved, because it will depend how he reacts to his training load this week, which is going up significantly. But it's pretty clear that even if he doesn't play on Saturday, he is very close to full fitness, so he'll definitely be involved next weekend. He's on track to start against West Ham, and that's obviously a massive boost, given it's a position where Sunderland at the moment are lacking sort of senior experience and sort of established options. Wilson Isidore could be back as well. He missed the game, he's got a minor thigh injury. There's nothing serious there, but Sunderland aren't taking any risks. I don't think he'll start on Saturday, but there's a chance he can be on the bench and maybe get 25 minutes, half an hour against Real Betis. So that will obviously be a positive and boosting Sunderland's options moving into that final week of pre-season before we then hit that West Ham game. So some positive signs there. Not expecting Anthony Patterson and Chris Rigg back. A little bit of a race against time for them in terms of being fit for the opening weekend of the season. There's some hope that they could play a part next weekend in those two final pre-season friendlies, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. So it's going to be a really good game. I expect Lebris to pick a really strong side. I don't think he'll make as many changes later in the game as he has been recently. I think we're really starting to focus in on the West Ham game. Hopefully some minutes of Granit Xhaka, and if everything gets announced and confirmed, maybe some minutes for Robin Roefs as well. So there's going to be plenty of interest in that game. It's going to be really interesting to see how Sunderland kind of step their preparations up heading into that game. As ever, we'll have absolutely stacks of content analysing the game and bringing you live updates from the game. And I'll be back to some video content afterwards as well. So stay tuned for that. But for now, I think that's enough for now. So thanks as ever for watching. Yeah, always a pleasure. And I will see you again very soon, hopefully with some of the info on signing number 9, whoever that may be. We shall see. Thanks for watching.